Ready for the next conversation?
Ready as I'll ever be.
It's been a couple of weeks because both of us were down with a cold.
Don't bore them.
We've been away for a while.
Oh, you need to give an excuse.
Yeah.
Sure, they weren't hanging on there on tenterhooks for us.
You never know.
Sure, they were running through the streets screaming.
Anyway, we are back with the latest episode, and today we are looking on the lighter side and brighter side of life. We are talking ideas and creativity, because one of the questions that we tend to get a lot is, where do your ideas come from?
Are ideas for the book specifically?
Oh, we'll start with
Too
the big
broad.
picture and then we'll talk about our books.
Really? Okay.
Okay, you didn't
Broadly.
read the brief, did you?
Never.
Okay.
I'd wing it.
All right, let's get started. You've been in the creative industry for a very long time.
Eons. Yeah.
Where do ideas come from?
I think they're things I've seen. I don't think it's some magic bolt lightning that comes from the heavens. I think it's something I've seen in a movie or in real life, in a book, just absolutely anywhere. Going for a walk and I just see something quirky that somebody does, and I respond to it. It appeals to me, so I lock it into my database and draw upon that. It's part of my creative pool, my schema of ideas that I draw upon. So yeah, why I'm drawn to certain things, like I like things a little bit darker, I like things that are a bit quirky, but I also like things that are heart-based and beautiful. So I like ideas that combine a bit of them both. And I don't know where that comes from. That's just some inner psychology, I guess, initially.
You've got a dark side.
Yeah,
And a light
well,
side, but I guess that's life, right? It's sort of that interplay between light and
yeah,
darkness.
I think some have more of one than the other.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a big question. Where does creativity come from?
I'm with you. I too don't like when people, give ideas and the process of creation too much airs and graces, because one, it makes it seem inaccessible to many people. I don't think there's something magical and spooky about it. I see it as more of a process. It starts with an intention to do a piece of work, or
Yeah.
to someone who may be working professionally, it's a brief that you receive to do a piece of work. So that's the first stimulus to say, okay, I want to do this piece of work, and what do I do? As soon as you've set that expectation for yourself, your brain starts churning away and your mind starts churning away. Even if you don't think about it consciously, or especially when you don't think about it consciously, your mind is still subconsciously working away because it knows it has to do that task. So you become more aware of things around you
That might relate to it.
That might
Yeah.
relate to it. That could be, oh, maybe I could use that. And often people would describe this as an epiphany. But what it is you had an intention to do a piece of work, and now at some level you're more aware of things that can help inform that piece of work and inspire and extend. And I don't think it's really one major epiphany. It's generally a series of ideas that emerges, and there's some that you're just a bit excited about, and then you sort of park it away, and then you develop it, and then more ideas come, and so on and so forth. So it really is, for me, I would say, a process. I think where this discussion will go, which I think is the more interesting discussion, is the different sources of inspirations that we tend to draw upon when we do a piece of work. I would like to make it very practical and take you through the journey we've been on with our Willow the Wonderer series, and share at a very practical level, here's where the ideas and inspiration came from, and here's how we developed it. So picture books have two sides. There's the story and the writing, And then there's the illustration, which is also part of the storytelling. We've taken a very interesting, unique, quirky kind of approach. The stories are unusual, and that's something we intentionally set out to do. And the illustrations are unique and
Very.
and convey, I guess, extend the story, which is what you wanted to do.
Humbly unique.
Yeah, so maybe that's where we head, unless at a broad level you wanted to share a few more things. Because creatives do make a meal out of ideas.
Okay, it's about me now, my turn.
Okay.
So I've just had a thought. When I used to do a lot more editorial illustrations for magazine, I used to read a brief, read the story, and produce an image, whether it be a small vignette or a full page. It could be for any magazine, Time magazine, Rolling Stone, you name it. And they give me the story, and I think, my God, that's a strange story. What do I do for that? But I'd read it a couple of times, and sometimes in the early days, I'd panic. And I thought, my God, the deadline's looming. I've only got a couple of days. And I didn't have an idea, and I learned that it was because I was forcing the idea. What I learned is to trust my mind and treat it like a computer that I just input data. I say, okay, listen, Darren, I want this idea. It's got to combine this has to say this to this type of audience. And then I just leave it. I forget about it. And I go for a run, I ride the bike, or I just be splashing my face in the morning. And it would just drop. The idea would just be there, boom, complete. And it was just like magic. And I just learned to trust that. It was my mind just working away in the background, and then the idea would just form by itself and go boom. And it was just, so I wanted to share that.
I've had a similar experience with the Willow the Wonderer series, in that I don't force the ideas for the stories or the premise. I know that I have to finish one book a year, which isn't a huge goal. I know I won't win any awards for productivity, but I know that come Christmas I have to start on the next Willow the Wonderer book, so that it's written in time for illustrations and October launch. And so that's always in my mind when I'm having a quiet moment. If I'm sitting quietly at the beach on our afternoon walks, or I'm sitting for meditation, an idea will sometimes drop, and I'll be like, and you feel excited about that idea. There's something that says there's something there. It's never complete. It still needs to be worked up and taken to interesting places beyond what the initial premise is. And that's it. It's more like a premise or it's more like a little inkling of an idea that has to be developed further.
I was specifically talking about editorial illustration, and the concepts that dropped were complete. It was a combination of this, and this that I told it, okay, I want this, and this, and then it would just organically go boom, there it is. So
this is working off a brief and knowing the dimensions.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? But again, it's not spooky, is it? It's just telling your mind.
That's pretty spooky. I think that's kind of spooky.
I think it's more the fact that you've provided all this input into your mind, and it's churning away in the background, and when you're in a relaxed state, it tells you, okay, boom.
It is kind of like the bolt lightning, but there is a difference, because when I see the complete concept, I can see the parts where I've got that from. So it's spooky in a sense, because I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. It's always a nice feeling, a bit of a rush, when an idea does pop into your mind, doesn't it?
Yeah, it means you can just chill a bit.
Yeah, you should chill. But I guess if you are someone who's listening to this, who wants to do a piece of work or aspires to do something, whether it's a painting, write a book, or whatever, and you feel that the starting point is having an idea, I guess if you take away anything from this, it's that it isn't really, it's about an intention that you want to do this piece of work. And this is the sort of work that you are drawn to, that you like, and that you'd like to do. Have that intention and tell yourself that you want to do this piece of work, and relax, be quite relaxed about it, and give yourself space and time for inspiration to arise in your mind. That's really the start of the creative journey of a piece of creative work. at least in my experience.
Yeah, relax and just let it happen.
Okay, time to get a bit more practical and talk through our Willow the Wonderer series, which is 4 books strong. We are working on the 5th and final book in the series at the moment. It's written, so Darren's illustrating it now. I think this will make it more tangible and give you an idea of the unexpected places you can draw inspiration from once you are doing a piece of work. This is the first book, Willow the Wonderer, and this is work we started in April 2020, to be very exact. And the reason I know this is because, well, it was not April, it was May 2020, because in March the country went into lockdowns. I went into a 2-month solitary retreat, and when I came out I started writing the book.
Do you want to explain what solitary retreat is to people who aren't au fait with what retreats are?
I did a meditation retreat. I have been a student and practitioner of meditation for a long time. I had this aspiration to spend time in a long retreat. I had done 10-day retreats, but I wanted to do something much longer so I could go deeper into the practice.
So that's a retreat. COVID.
So yeah, let me finish the story.
Okay.
If you're okay, just relax.
Just just trying to, I can just see them all leaving.
No, they're not.
The room.
Darren found me a hut in a forest that he had volunteered to build in the mid-north coast. I hired that hut and spent 60 days living there on my own during the COVID lockdown, the first COVID lockdown period that went on from probably end of March, April, May. It was about 60 days, wasn't it? End of May, because it ended as my retreat ended. So for 60 days I lived in a hut by myself, didn't speak to anyone, and just practiced meditation from morning to evening, maybe 12 to 14 hours a day. And it was a wonderful experience because it was my investigation into the nature of mind and understanding what the mind is, what thoughts are, and how to navigate it all. So it was a very profound experience. Before we went into that, Darren and I had met, and during a walk one day I shared with him an intention that I had, which was to write a children's book that conveyed wisdom and knowledge that I felt was not provided to us in all the narratives that we grew up with. And by that stage I had been exploring the Eastern philosophical traditions, so yoga, and Eastern contemplative traditions, so Buddhism. I had been studying and exploring that in my early adulthood years as I was trying to make sense of life and what it was all about and how I was going to live mine. And I realized that there's so much valuable insights into the nature of mind, into this whole idea of life and living that was just never part of mainstream narrative. And I just thought to myself, oh my God, had I known these things, why is this knowledge so difficult to get? And two, why don't we...
It's just difficult to access. It's not difficult to get. It's just...
Well, that's what I mean by get. It's difficult to... It's not available in the mainstream.
No, you can't pick it up from a shelf in the corner store, can you?
Well, you can if you know that this is the book you should read, but it's just not part of mainstream narrative and conversation. And for someone who came from the Eastern tradition, it was a bit of, why wasn't this told to me? This is my heritage. I should have been taught this from a very young age. And this is not criticizing anyone, but it's sort of saying how the essence of life and living that's contained in this sort of traditions has just sort of fallen off mainstream narratives, and I just don't understand why.
It's never there. In the Western culture, it's never been there.
Okay, that's true. It's
a
probably
little bit in the 60s, and then it kind of dropped off.
It's probably the impact of westernization, but even in Eastern traditions, the bias is more towards the more ritualistic based practice as opposed to the philosophical aspect, which I feel, frankly, is the most relevant in today's world. So anyway, there was a part of me that by that stage was thinking, you know what, I'm going to write a book for kids that tells them these things that took me such a long time to find out, And I had started writing and illustrating a book and realized that I really cannot illustrate a book. I had made a valiant attempt at illustration,
you did.
and had sort of begun exploring different types of stories and how to tell stories. There were a few elements that I had already established in my mind. I'm not going to be preachy. It's not going to read like a manual. It's going to be a storybook. It's going to have a wonderful, fantastic, engaging story, and it's going to be illustrated because it was going to be targeted at young children, because it's at that age, you have to plant seed of wisdom early. And it's never too early to plant seed of wisdom. So I had done that piece of work, and I was sharing with Darren, hey, this is what I've been sort of working on in the background. And I knew, of course, he was an illustrator by then. And I said, would you be interested? And so then Darren shared me his story.
I remember we had a lot of time on our hands and we went for a walk on the beach, and then it was, we should do something. We should produce something. What have you got? Have you got any ideas? And it's then that I told you about my idea. You told me about your book with the river and all that sort of stuff. That's how I remembered it. But it all started with a walk on the beach. Remember?
We did have a lot of time in our hands. You're right in that I did say we should work on something together, because the country had already been shut down, which is why I was in Highland Park with you. And then you shared this idea you had about Willow the Wonderer, that you've attempted to get off the ground a few times, but hadn't quite...
Once before.
Oh, once before, okay.
Yeah.
But hadn't quite managed to
yeah, I
land
took
it.
to a publisher I'd done a couple of books with, and they just said it was more self-help than a children's book genre.
Yeah. Darren then shared this story that he had in mind, and this first stanza, which credit goes to him, is how the book appeared in his mind, right?
It was just there. It was just pretty much about my life. It's about being very successful professionally in life and satisfying my ego goals, and then feeling deflated and thinking that there's more. So it's pretty much my life. What's interesting about this is one of the concepts I've got running through this, all the animals and the bits and pieces that you have to find in it, they're all hidden in the landscape almost seamlessly.
Can you just hold that thought? Because going back to the discussion we had about how sometimes ideas just pop into your head, you were obviously going through deep introspection about your life and reflecting. Did you have an intention to do a children's book by that stage?
Well, I was an illustrator. I'd already done a couple of children's books, so it was easy for me to think about a children's book, a way of communicating on a bigger scale to people that idea.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is when Darren told me the story, he said he had this verse appear in his mind, which was really the catalyst for the work. And the verse is the first verse of our Willow the Wonderer series, which is, Willow the Wanderer woke up one day, wondering about happiness and where it lay. He shared that stanza with me and told me the premise of the story. So this little boy goes wandering from home and he looks everywhere, he's searching for happiness. As he described that concept to me, it resonated deeply, because Darren says it was his life story and I felt it was my life story. And in fact, it's resonated with a lot of our readers who felt that it's their life story. Because that's what we do. We grow up and, we all aspire to be happy, right? It's a common human aspiration that we all have. And we go out into the world searching for happiness in all the places outside. And, some of us have a good time. Sometimes it's a good experience. You sort of have fun and enjoy the experience. But when we have that moment of honesty, we realize, well, happiness isn't quite outside there, is it? And I guess one of the things that Darren...
there's a lot of short-lived happiness, sensations,
but
contentment.
Enduring kind of contentment that brings us peace and calms us down that we're kind of looking for.
Yeah, it's more a drug.
Exactly, it's more the highs and lows of life, and that's exactly the journey Willow goes in. You know, he's a kid who goes out looking for happiness, has a great time, but then as each experience ends, he's like, where is this happiness? And so it was our life story. It's everyone's life story in some ways.
Oh, well, not everyone's, but it was ours.
Yeah, and it's resonated with a lot of people because it's a common life experience. But what I guess I was trying to say is that the element we hadn't quite resolved at that stage is what is the lesson. And Darren had a few ideas at that stage that it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, etc. And you know, whilst I can understand that, to me, you know, even the journey can be shit sometimes. It's not a given that you'll enjoy the journey. So to me, that is not the essence of the wisdom.
It's not. I just thought it was just accept the journey, and you know, even if it's a bad journey, if you're arrived at a good place, then it was worthwhile. Just be reflective and have some wisdom about the journey, I think.
Yeah, and that's where the creative process was interesting, because there was a spark, and we put our head together and said, well, what can we do with the concept? And we developed it into this story that was almost a parody of our life, about going out everywhere looking for happiness and having moments where you say, okay, I did not find the happiness I was looking for. And then having that moment where you become quiet and you settle down and say, well, what is the insight? We debated the insight quite a bit. What is the so what we're going to leave our readers with? Because part of the conundrum was the age group we were writing the book for. I personally, when I set out to do this piece of work, I did not want to do pop psychology kind of pieces that appease, that is so surface level, it doesn't really say anything. Even though we are writing for a young reader, I wanted to leave real insights that even if they don't completely comprehend at that age, it's going to stay with them and it'll grow. And when the time is right, that seed will blossom and they'll get it. It'll go back to that story they heard when they were a kid and it'll make sense. And to me, that was the win. And from a creative viewpoint, that was my position that I wanted to bring into the book. That was my authentic creative position. And so we pushed at that idea and even worked it through with the editors to finally land on what we did as the conclusion of the book. And the conclusion only arrived right at the end, you know, and we were still debating it even as we went into the second printing of the book, whether it was the right one. And I held my ground because that's my authentic position, that I want the book to say this. I'm the author at the end of the day, and this is what the story needs to say because this is my lived experience. And that lived experience was, of course, I mean, we can say it, bit of a spoiler, but you know.
No, they should find out for themselves.
Do you reckon?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
for those who have the book, okay, for those who have the book, you know. But that's what I mean. There was inspiration, ideas, and we develop it. And just listening to Darren describe the art he wanted to do for the book, it just occurred to me, what if we incorporate accounting into the book? Because then there's a reason for kids to engage, kids and adults to engage in the illustrations, because they're learning to count and they're having to find all these creatures that Darren has sort of hidden into the landscape.
Yeah, cunningly as well, I think.
Although I think the kids kind of outsmarted you, didn't they?
Yeah, do you want me to tell you about where that came from? Because I think that's quite an interesting.
Yeah.
I was at my grandmother's, and she used to have a fire, an open fireplace, and I used to sit for hours and I used to just watch the flames. I was just enchanted by them. I used to sit there and watching the embers glow, and I'd see scenes and I'd imagine objects in them and narratives and scenes carrying on, and that's what I incorporated into this book, because this came along and I thought I could, you know, it was such a good idea to actually, you know, that idea when you look up in a cloud and you think, oh my God, I can almost see something in it.
Yeah, so it sort of evolved as we worked, and different ideas dropped in at different points in time. Even for example, this stanza here: 7 frolicking dolphins, 8 tumbling shells, 9 rollicking starfish. And then it has to be something like swells, but I couldn't quite get it. Darren and I went for a walk, and we are near Tamarama, I think, and we were standing and staring at the big waves coming in. It's just fascinating when you stand on the cliff top and you see all the surfers. Darren turned to me and said, "Surfing salty swells." And that was it. And
I think I might have licked salt crystal for my cheek or something. You know?
And it just fell into place. It's like, yeah, surfing salty swells, that's it. Another interesting memory I have of this book is I was thinking of what creatures to include in the first page, and I had 1 lazing lion, 2 snoring bears, because he's in the mountains, so it had to be creatures that can be found in a mountain realistically. And I'm thinking, which creatures do we include? We were in Highland Park at this stage and went to the beach, Bella Beach, to see the sunrise. As we were sitting, this majestic sea eagle just rises up. All the sun's rays just fell on it, and it was like, that's it. It's a soaring eagle, and that soaring eagle is an eagle we actually saw there sitting on the beach. So that's an example of an idea you had incubated in your mind for 20 years, wasn't it, by the time we started working on it?
Pretty much, yeah, it must have been.
So a 20-year-old idea, a spark, that we then developed into the first book. And that was going to be it. But as we launched the book, it started resonating, didn't it?
Yeah, it started the ball rolling, and we've got a few more on the way. So we want to move on to Honey Time?
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's a bit of an interesting story, isn't it?
So Honey Time is inspired by Darren. When I first went to his place, Darren was cooking me a pasta dish. And I saw him working, and he was really taking his time. And you know, I'm efficient when it comes to cooking. I've grown up in a big family. I've been cooking since I was walking. And so I'm very efficient in the kitchen, and I get, shit done and get out, right?
Trumpet sounds.
There's Darren cooking pasta, and he picks up an onion. And it feels like he's staring at the onion for a whole hour before he starts cutting it. I was just chuckling to myself a little bit. And
I was staring at the fire at my grandma's. That's what I was
looking
for inspiration in the onion.
That kind of describes the pace at which you go through life.
Yeah, exactly.
Fast forward a few years, I'm at a yoga studio. I think it was Dara's class, and everybody's rushing through. She stopped everyone and said, "You're not practicing yoga the way you're supposed to. You're supposed to be in the moment and enjoy the movement, be aware of all movement, and have that awareness as you transition in and out of poses." To help people slow down, what she said is, imagine you are in a world filled with honey and move like you would move through that world. I remember sort of thinking to myself, that's an interesting thought. And I parked it away. And years later, I meet Darren, and he actually moves through life as if the world is filled with honey. I smile about it, and over time, as we got to know each other, I started calling him Honey Boy.
When the irreverence starts kicking in after the honeymoon period.
So anyway, we go on a holiday during Christmas, and we are on a hike on the Great Capel Island in Queensland. And of course, Darren's dragging his feet whilst I'm powering ahead. I sort of look back at him, and I'm getting frustrated because I really want to get to the end point of the hike, which was a beautiful lagoon that you can snorkel in. But it was a tidal lagoon, so we had to get there before low tide. And he's bloody taking his time, and I'm thinking, oh, come on, man. And out of that frustration, it just occurred to me, what if the next book is about Willow being trapped in honey and going through life at a really slow pace? It just dropped into my head, the whole honey boy, the whole yoga experience. It collided into this narrative. The lesson for everyone is to slow down and be still. I was in this beautiful environment and all I could think of was getting to my destination. I wasn't enjoying the experience, and it just clicked to me, well, there's the lesson.
Yeah.
And that was the premise for the second book.
Honey time.
Honey time. What about the illustration? Do you want to talk anything about the illustration in terms of style? Because you did some interesting things here.
Yeah, so I guess I'm interested in technology, so I've combined traditional painting with some digital effects, and I play around with filters and all sorts of things just to sort of keep me interested and challenged.
It was interesting because it looked like the marbling technique.
That's where I started, the marbling technique. That's just another effect you can get on the computer. I like mixing them up and challenging myself. That was Honey Time. Space Odyssey. How did we come up with that one?
Space Odyssey is a slightly controversial one. The premise of the story came from the socio-political environment we found ourselves in, and my discomfort with identity politics and the culture wars that were playing out at the time. I was really trying to reconcile all the different viewpoints, arguments, and it was getting quite heated between different groups that were pushing one identity or challenging the notion of it. It has sort of settled down, but at that time it was at peak combat zone, where everybody was very opinionated one way or another, and either virtue signaling very heavily or really dissing down on the other person really heavily, and it wasn't a great environment. So, you know, by that stage I have moved on. I am an adult.
Speak for yourself.
By that stage, I had moved beyond this whole kind of notion of identity. One of the things I have found in my life personally is, as a young person, there's a lot of pressure on you as you're coming of age to really have a sense of self and to define yourself. And one of the traps we tend to fall into as we seek to do this is we choose different groups and communities and alliances and identities. I'm Rita, I'm a woman, I'm a feminist, I'm progressive, left of center, I'm... It's only later in life that you realize it's actually quite limiting because it puts you into a box. It doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about that tag. You know, there may be some parts of the audience who think, oh, progressive is a good thing. But some people may say, oh, it's a progressive, you know.
Hippies.
You tend to always create a sense of separation from another group of people. Whatever box you pigeonhole yourself in is never going to describe you completely. There's always going to be elements of the stereotype, even say something as broad as a woman, you know. There's all these preconceived notions of a woman that feminists have fought for many years. But even that idea of feminism has so many preconceived notions to it that it may not describe the stance of a person down to a T. And so I always struggled with identity because I never neatly fitted into a box, and I don't think anyone does. One of my discomforts has been this realization of how much we are pushed and told that you have to be in a box, you have to have a sense of self, that's when you find your community. What growing up and especially exploring the spiritual traditions and the contemplative traditions taught me is this idea of ego. Ego in the spiritual, yogic or Buddhist traditions doesn't mean egoistical behavior. What it means is identity. It means labels and tags. These are all social constructs. And we create this image of ourselves, and then we put it on a pedestal, and then we protect it. And we develop a very strong attachment towards it, to the extent where if anybody challenges that image, we rile up and we fight. I was seeing that happening in the social environment, on social media, in the discourses, in mass media. And I just felt that young people were being led astray. What I found through my years of practicing things like meditation is that true freedom lies in letting go of these egoistical constructs of self, these man-made notions of identity. And the more you let go of it, the greater freedom you find. And the less it becomes about looking at another person and finding an us and them kind of comparison, and being able to relate to them at a human level, which is what we should all do anyway. I understand the positives of identity politics, and I understand that there are groups of people who are marginalized and discriminated against, and identity politics has been the lever through which they have fought for their rights and got equality in the society, and that's all well and good. But I think once you reach that normalized position, it's important to also just relax and let go of that identity a little bit and embrace the broader aspect of yourself as a person and relate to the other on grounds that are common instead of finding things that are different. So really, Space Odyssey was born from that insight, from that awareness that freedom comes from letting go of these constructs of self. And so that's where the story is. You know, Willow wakes up feeling alone and different because he's got this notion of who Willow is. And then he goes on this epic journey, searching everywhere in the world for other people like him. Every time he met someone, he found some dimension along which they were different. And so he never really found that sense of community. Even when he met other donkeys or asses, he saw what was different. That's where the idea and story evolved. The insight or wisdom reference in this was something you had shared with me, which is about
the overview effect.
Yeah, the overview effect is
the experience that astronauts get when they view the Earth from outer space, and they just see it as a sort of pale blue dot, you know, in the gargantuan universe, and they have an affinity for the whole of mankind, and they don't see the separation of people, they don't see the walls and borders, they just see us all in one place, in one home, and they become overwhelmed. They feel a connection to mankind, they feel more empathetic.
They understand the fallacy of these man-made constructs that
and they want to protect the environment a bit more.
They feel connected, right?
Yeah.
They feel connected to everyone on Earth at a human level. And when we let go of all these constructs of gender and race and religion and political ideologies, that's what we are left with. We are left with our humanity. That's the message of that book. If you had to find an identity, it's that identity.
Yeah.
It's your common humanity
Exactly.
that you need to connect on.
Exactly.
And so that's how I felt so deeply in my bones as all these culture wars we're playing with. If I could tell one thing to young people who are feeling isolated and lonely and different, it's that you're not. Let go of these constructs that society has created and understand you belong. The fact that you exist in this world means you belong, and nobody can take that away from you. That's what Willow discovers at the end when he sees Earth from above and feels that sense of connection, that he's part of everything in the world and he's deeply connected. So when I signed this book for young kids, I actually leave that message, stay connected, because I think that's a feeling that we are born with. But then we hear all these stories about differences that we start feeling more and more isolated. And it's really sad that we do that to ourselves and each other. This was a very heartfelt piece for me. It was a difficult thing to write and a difficult idea to develop. But I think at the end of the day, these books are not preachy. This is about a fantastic narrative. And the narrative is fantastic. It's an adventurous quest that Willow goes through to search for others like him, and then through the course of his adventures, he has that insight and understanding.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I should also add, before we move on to the fourth and final book, one of the things I realized as I finished the fifth book is I've actually been following that hero's journey kind of archetype for every book I've written. And that's because I grew up steeped in fables and mythology. That was the main narrative structure that I grew up with in my life.
Yeah.
I've never read Joseph Campbell's work until now, and I've never had a formal education in this sort of narrative archetype. I've never had a formal education in mythology and the structure and the way the story is constructed. But when I started writing, I pretty much followed, the exact structure without
Well, they're
consciously
there in our
studying
nature,
it.
all the archetypes.
Exactly. Event happens that challenges your notion of reality, and then you go on its quest. You may meet someone who guides you, and then through these kind of encounters, you have these epiphanies, and that's the hero's journey. So every book is actually based on that archetype.
Did you want me to explain a bit about the art in this one?
Exactly.
So
What were your inspirations?
again, to keep it interesting for me, I developed the technique where oil and water doesn't mix, and it creates a kind of a marbling effect. If you drop water into oil paint or oil into water-based paints, you get this sort of marbling effect. I developed this technique digitally, in fact. As I was working away, my hand slipped, and I used this this Wacom pen, and it kind of slipped out of my hand, and I dropped all this ink onto the illustration. It gave me a really nice effect.
So you used the marbling effect. You first developed it for Honey Time, and then you carried it on in Space Odyssey.
So in Space Odyssey, I developed the marbling effect a bit further, and it was just purely by accident. What I've learned is to embrace the accidents. I call them happy accidents, and be open to them. So to just be open to making mistakes and not just discard them, but look at them for potential for producing something authentic and something new. So I made a mistake with the effect that I developed in Space Odyssey. I just dropped paint on the floor, but I'd actually dropped it onto the screen, and it created this effect which I parked for a while, and then looking back on it, created something that I hadn't seen before in any children's book. So yeah, proud of this.
So I mean, if I were to just wrap up this inspirations for the book, the genesis of the story was really the social political environment, but also the scientific work and the inspirations that Darren had through space travel. I mean, you, as a kid, you loved astronauts, didn't you?
Yeah, I wanted to be whisked away by aliens into outer space. That was my longing, to be up there in the stars.
And it was also my childhood as well. That feeling that Willow wakes up with, where he feels alone and different, is a feeling I've had when I was little. In fact, one of the reviews we got for the book series overall recently was from a parent, a mum, who wrote that the stories, the events in the book resonate very well to a child. It's very relatable. And I was very happy to read that, because when I'm writing and developing the stories, I go back to the deep feelings and emotions I used to have as a child. And feeling alone, even though I was in a big family, was part of it. You'll see a bit of Vincent in the story, in the illustration.
Oh, yeah. There's sunflowers.
In pretty much all the Wanderer book, and that's a common love we have. And I guess one of the other pieces of work that I read a few times and listened to a few times was Carl Sagan's Blue Dot.
Pale Blue Dot.
Pale Blue Dot. It's a very interesting story. The way he describes those Apollo missions is that here they were, all these astronauts were going to the moon, and their sights were set on the moon. And off they went. They built this huge space program, built all that spaceship, and launched and had all these feats. And the biggest discovery they had was when they turned back and looked at the Earth rise from space. They realized, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, they got more than they thought they got, but it wasn't what they thought they'd achieve.
So all those influences went into it, and I hope people can take away from that. It's never just one thing, but a whole host of different inspirations and ideas coming in to form a complete piece of work. The Gift, this is probably one of the main books where the inspiration was directly referencing an insight from a contemplative tradition, which is this idea of impermanence.
Yeah.
So we wanted to develop a book that conveys impermanence.
Yeah.
That life, things come and go.
Even your life eventually.
Even your life. And we do touch on, I guess, in a very delicate way, we touch on death and grief at the end.
Yeah.
Very delicately, we talk on parting with a loved one. And for some kids, it's an experience they have, unfortunately, at a very young age. So it was important, I felt, to address it. But impermanence was really the theme, and it's a central part of the Buddhist philosophy. But again, it's in all sort of different traditions, in mythological and fable traditions coming from Persia, for example. That phrase, "this too shall pass," derives from the mythologies from Persia.
George Harrison covered it too in All Things Must Pass, and he was deep into Eastern philosophy.
So this really started with the message, and the message was impermanence. And again, I don't want to write a preachy book, it has to be a good story. I ended up reflecting on my life and thinking, where did I learn the lesson of impermanence the most? And the story itself is based on a really difficult hike. I went on a 10-day solo hike in the wilds of Patagonia, and on bad planning on my part, I ended up alone on the trail for the first 3 days as the weather was deteriorating, a storm was raging, and early in the season when there was a lot of snow cover still on the trail, so you couldn't really see the trail. And so those first 3 days on the trail alone was very edgy, and a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty, all those things you have to deal with, and difficulties because you're climbing up icy slopes without the proper gear, and sliding and slipping. There's this massive storm and Patagonian winds. So I went through probably physically the most difficult thing I had done in my life. I wasn't adequately prepared, but I persevered. I had this really strong connection and awareness to an inner voice, an inner guide that kept urging me to keep going, not to stop, and almost guided me in this strange environment on exactly what to do. And so it was a very profound experience for me. I got very close to nature and also learned an important lesson in calming the mind down, listening, making decisions, and most importantly, keep going, which became the message in the book.
Yeah. So let's not keep going, let's wrap up the talk.
You have to talk about anything you want to talk about with the illustrations, like what was it? It's a different style in this one.
Yeah, this is more sort of watercolor. It's back to more of a traditional way of producing a book, and I think it was just, I'd done a bit more experimenting with digital effects and went back to nature. So this is just a traditional watercolor.
There were a few other inspirations. The fox, the whole book, the landscape is actually based on Tibet, right? Because we were referencing wisdom from the Buddhist tradition. A lot of our training has come from Tibetan Buddhist traditions. Yeah. The landscape of the book was based on Tibet. And if you have looked at the fox and felt, oh, that's an unusual looking fox, it's because it's based on the Tibetan fox.
Yeah. And when we talk about Buddhism, we're not talking about the religious aspect of Buddhism.
We're talking about Buddhist philosophy.
Secular. We're talking about secular.
Which is how
secular
I guess
philosophy.
we've understood and practiced, and a lot of people in the West, that's how they practice it. And The only other inspiration was actually our trip to Tibet.
Yeah, I fed a marmot. I put in every page of the book. The kids have to find certain animals or items in all the books.
So it was a pretty fat marmot.
He was well fed. I think I was hungrier than that marmot when I met him. I felt like taking his food.
So hopefully
Okay,
that gives
that's it.
everyone an idea of just how varied the influences can be. Ideas come from many different places. You find inspiration everywhere, really, and it's about doing the work to bring it all together to produce something that is a complete statement.
It's about intent and focus, and then relaxing and trusting yourself, really, having confidence.
Exactly. For my part, one last thing I would say is it doesn't happen overnight. I play with the idea in my mind for a good 6 months before I put pen to paper. And I know people work differently, but that works for me. I'll have different ideas and keep patching it in my mind and constructing a story, a narrative arc. Then I really only put pen to paper during Christmas, New Year. That's when I start. 3 months of solid writing and editing is what leads to the narrative. But I have developed the story for 6 months in my mind. What about you with the illustrations? Do you just work it?
I don't develop over 6 months, but usually because I like challenges, I like trying different looks and mediums, so it's usually a departure from the previous book.
Cool.
Just to keep it interesting, So
that's a creative process. And
yeah.
that's where ideas, at least our ideas, come from. Okay, thank you for listening.
Go forth and create. I didn't know we were doing that every time.
We do that every time.
Yeah, so go forth, create.
Thank you for listening. Walk away. You're supposed to walk away.
Huh?
Thank you for listening. Walk away.
Oh, you didn't? Okay. Do it again. You didn't tell me to walk.
We always do
I was
that.
picking up I was picking up the goddamn cups.